and welcome to Aqua Rach. I just wanted to make a really quick video today because it's my birthday. So I'm gonna paint a little birthday cupcake for myself. This is a new sketchbook and I've featured this little palette in another video, but I really like this tiny little palette. I glued a magnet onto it, which makes sketching really easy because then I don't have to worry about losing it. So I'll put a link to that in the description. I bought it on Etsy from an artist who does a lot of urban sketching, and he makes these little palettes in all different kinds of shapes and sizes. So I chose the one with just 4 wells in it because I really like the idea of when I'm sketching just using a very limited palette. And the colors that I've decided to use are just from that R.M.Broadwell set that I bought, and I also featured that in another video. But that will be linked below as well if you're ever interested in that. R.M.Broadwell has a whole bunch of limited palette sets. I've only got one, and it would be really easy just to buy them all if I could. I definitely would, I'm sure. So right now I'm pretty happy just kind of exploring this palette, and my idea is just to fill up this entire sketchbook with just this limited palette and kind of just see how it evolves over time. R.M.Broadwell has a whole bunch of limited palette sets, and if I could, I know that I would just buy a whole bunch of them because they're so interesting, the different color combinations that they have. Of course, you can just buy all the tubes individually. I don't really think it's any cheaper to do that, but kind of cool just to see the way that someone else decided to curate some limited palettes in ways that I wouldn't necessarily expect. And I really like this palette because it reminds me of the Zorn palette. Anders Zorn, who was an impressionist from, I think, Sweden. And he's really famous for using a very limited color palette, especially when he did portraits. And his palette was basically just a red, a yellow ochre, I think, ivory black, and then of course just white. So, and he made some amazing compositions with that very limited palette. I've actually been doing a lot of my oil paintings with that palette, even my landscapes, because you'd be surprised at how blue ivory black is. You can actually mix it with yellow and get kind of a green. I'm just using a photo reference to kind of doodle this little cupcake. My daughter made me a carrot cake, which is my favorite kind of cake. So I actually looked up a picture of like a carrot cake cupcake, but I'm not going to paint the little carrot on it. It was really kind of a challenge to paint white frosting in a way that, you know, I could actually do some painting with it. So it ended up looking a little bit orange, which is totally fine. And I think with this sketchbook, I want to get better at painting very loosely, focusing more on painting large shapes and painting against the light is the term that I keep coming across with a lot of the watercolor paintings that I admire. So painting against the light basically refers to leaving areas that are receiving light, leaving those either white or a very light wash that you lay in initially. And then most of your time painting is focused on emphasizing the large shapes that are in shadow. And that was a little bit tricky to do with this cupcake because I'm using like a stock photo from pixabay.com. And that's something I've been kind of thinking about lately and wanting to talk about. And I'll probably make a more extensive video about it. But anytime that we're using a photo reference that was taken by a professional, or we get it from a website like pixabay.com, or there's several others like pexels.com. I can't really think of any others right off the top of my head, but there's a lot of websites where they have photos that photographers can voluntarily submit, and then those photos are kind of in the public domain, so you don't have to worry about copyright, and you can use them as reference, which is really great, and I really appreciate it. But the issue as an artist is that a lot of times those really highly professional photographs are not ideal for painting because the lighting is maybe a little bit too perfect. Things tend to be, just a little bit too arranged, I think, and they're not very natural. Like, I've found it really difficult to find a still life that is, unique. Most of the still lifes are like these perfect, like, flower arrangements, and that's not really what I have in mind when I want to do a still life. Or if I look up portraits, it's always like some model and not really just like a everyday kind of natural looking person. So it can be a little bit tricky, but I mean, it's still a great resource and a great way to study, especially if you want to paint something that you can't get your own photograph of. But most of the time I like to actually just work from my own photographs, and I'm not anything close to being a professional photographer. I just take pictures with my phone most of the time, and even if I do have my nice camera with me, my pictures are really nothing that would even be worth posting on Instagram or anything like that. So I still think that those kinds of pictures make the best painting references, though, because first of all, if I took the picture, it means that it's something that inspired me in that moment. And second of all, I really like paintings that aren't just, picture perfect and nicely arranged. I like a lot of imperfection, and I like to paint kind of ordinary subjects a lot of times. So usually when I do my tutorials on this channel, I get my pictures from pixabay.com, just because, sometimes I think a tutorial is better and more attractive if it's like a mountain or a beautiful lake or something that I don't have here where I live in the Midwest. So, maybe I will, though, be able to do more tutorials with just my own photos. I'm not sure if I could at least try it and see if it catches on, I guess. So yeah, anyway, I am starting this little sketch journal this year. I ideally want to paint in it every single day, of course, and just kind of see how it evolves. It's a little Arteza sketchbook, so it was very inexpensive. It does have watercolor paper in it, but it's like every other sheet is textured, and then there's like the other side of the sheet is smooth, and that kind of annoys me, but I'll make it work. My dogs are snoring in the background. Sorry about that. So there it is, and I'm just gonna let it dry. There we go, it's dry. So I'm just going back in with pen and just adding a few little lines. It didn't really need much, and I didn't want to go overboard. That's it.